um, joining us today on this uh, freewheeling chat on equalization levy, which of course is expert on the subject. Uh, as, before I first, I uh, would want to say that this topic of equalization levy has received a lot of attention, both in terms of the what intended and how the law is worded. And I think after the MS bill, the discussion has only intensified. So, as a company which runs legal income tax oriented legal research and legal analytics portal, we thought we should do our bit to add to the knowledge base. And I'm very, very fortunate that on that initiative I have got two really expert tax professionals as our speakers today, Sandeep Dasgupta and Zena Bukwala, both of whom I have known for many years. They are with Deloitte, and they are been tax professionals for now many years. Sandeep, of course, I have known now as someone who's done M&A tax, corporate tax, and has looked at many taxation structures for many clients. He and I have worked on uh, many critical deals, bringing foreign investors into India, looking at family structuring, and many other interesting transactions. And over the years, I have been only fascinated by his depth of tax knowledge. Zena Vikuli, I have known her for many years and seen her advising clients with a real empathy, if I may say that. She takes a lot of initiative to make her clients understand and feel the nuances of tax law. So I'm very happy, Sandeep and Zainab, that you are here. You are joined by a group of tax professionals. They come from corporates, from consulting firms. Some of them are customers, some of them are subscribers of our newsletter, but all of them have a lot of commitment towards learning and understanding. So you see them all over here, and I hope they will all benefit from your discussion, and you will benefit from their presence. Thank you, and over to both of you, Sandeep and Zenab.
Thank you very much, Dipankar. Thank you, Riverus family, for this great privilege and opportunity today to present a brief perspective on equalization levy. Indeed, thank you very much for the benevolent words and introduction and setting the context too. Good evening, everyone. We trust that all of you are well and are doing safe. We thank all of you today for sparing your valuable time for this session. Based on the introduction I received from Dipankar now, it's nothing new really that the digital or the e-way has been a way of our lives much before the breakout of the worldwide COVID pandemic. The pandemic has in fact educated us more and made us more dependent on the digital means as a manner of survival, whether as a business or as a consumer. And therefore, I always feel that the importance of today's topic.
Yeah, Mike,
Or did
you
I
not.
lose? Did you lose me somewhere?
Yes, Sandeep.
What I just request the participants to be on mute, please. Unfortunately, yeah. So what I was mentioning is that this is, I mean, the importance of this topic today on digital economy taxation, essentially focusing on the implications of equalization levy in India is very imperative for the reasons, in fact, much beyond the points of our discussion today. And this is simply because it pertains to political and socio-economic prudence, and fiscal necessities, as you may all appreciate, besides the ever-evolving business models, structures, all influenced by technology and even global thinking by businesses, governments, and policymakers all alike. So what we have thought is Zainab and I will just make a humble attempt today to once again refresh your minds with some of the tax consideration points around EQL. I firmly believe, sorry, am I audible? I firmly believe that all of you know this topic pretty well and even better possibly than us. Therefore, I can only request, we shall only request and rather your attention as we touch upon some of the perspectives for our deliberation for onward research and discussion by all of us, maybe sooner than later. And I would, before in fact Zainab gets onto the slides and we jointly navigate through, let us remind ourselves about a good fact about EQL to start with. And the good fact is it is temporary in nature and it will be scrapped eventually once the global consensus is reached on digital economic taxation. But equally on the same plane is a bad fact about EQL, and that's one really doesn't know when and in what form the global consensus shall be reached. May I request participants to just kindly put themselves on mute unless and until we are interacting. With that brief, let me request Zainab to come in and lead us into the presentation as we go along. Thank you. Over to you, Zainab.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandeep. Is my screen visible, the presentation?
Yes, Zainab, it is visible. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll first start by discussing the provisions and a little bit of history about equalization levy, and post that we will take up certain issues which are there hovering over this new levy, and thereafter certain case laws will be discussed in this regard. These fundamental aspects I'll quickly run through, as most of us are aware about this facts as such. So how did this equalization levy come up as a levy to be imposed under the unilateral tax laws, that is under the domestic tax laws? So OECD in 2013 had initiated this BEPS project, and one of the topics in the BEPS project was in relation to the taxation challenges faced in the digital economy. Now, BEPS Action 1 report was issued somewhere around in October 2015, and in that report, a lot of options were discussed as to how does the tax challenges need to be dealt with in relation to the digital economy. Few of the options listed on the slide, like SEP, withholding tax on digital transactions, or consumption-based tax, and equalization levy. If we look at each of these options, we will realize that India has already implemented all these options in some form or the other in its domestic tax law.
So Zainab, if I can interrupt for a minute. So as the participants may appreciate, while these are the measures which were deliberated at the OECD level, all of you know that these were not recommended as a kind of a final move which needs to be adopted by the global nations, but it has been still a work in progress. But India, being a front runner in this entire BEPS project, as all of us know, actually landed all these measures in the tax law in some way or the other. And all of these four, which you can see on the screen, are already a part of our Indian legislation. And what we are going to really cover is the topic on equalization levy. So, and one more aspect, if I can just come up or highlight, is OECD very clearly said that while you are considering imposing or enacting any of these measures in your domestic tax laws, you must respect the tax treaties in particular. You should not be really diluting those while you are implementing this measure. In a way, possibly it also hinted in some way of international coherence in the tax policies. Zainab, you may move on.
Yes. So as Sandeep mentioned, OECD never recommended any of the options. One of the reasons was OECD was not encouraging a lot of unilateral implications, because that would have led to a lot of chaos, and there would be a lot of operational challenges for these digital companies, since if every country imposes a digital tax in its own country in a manner which is different from the other country, it would be a big it would be a lot of hassles for these digital companies to tackle with the same. However, as I mentioned, all these four options have already been, in some way, been implemented in a domestic tax. SEP, as we are aware, Finance Act 2018 has amended the definition of business connection, and SEP was included within the said definition. Withholding tax on digital transactions, if we date back to 2012, somewhere royalty payments, software payments being taxed as royalty was one of the steps towards taxing digital transactions. And as recent as 2020, 194O, that is of course on domestic transactions, digital transactions, but 194O is also a kind of withholding tax on digital transactions in India. And consumption-based tax, of course, GST, there have been a lot of amendments. OIDAR is one of such levy wherein digital transactions have been targeted. And our topic of discussion today is equalization levy. Moving on to the next slide. Now, how did India incorporate this equalization levy? So immediately after BEPS Action 1 report was issued, India formed a committee to evaluate that and come to a conclusion to incorporate some digital tax levy within its domestic tax laws. And what the committee decided was it had reviewed all these options which were there, which were stated in the Action Plan 1. And it came to a conclusion that the best option would be equalization levy. And one of the reasons for that is that if SEP and withholding tax option would have been implemented, that would have to be implemented within the Income Tax Act. And the non-resident can very well take the DTAA, that's a double taxation avoidance agreement, beneficial provisions can be claimed, and these SEP and withholding tax provisions under the Act would be a kind of redundant as far as the countries with which India is having double taxation avoidance. So the option which was selected was equalization levy. And what the committee also suggested is that equalization levy should be kept outside the Income Tax Act. So it is in a nature, you may say it's a kind of an indirect tax and not a direct tax. One more recommendation of the committee which led to the belief that it's a kind of indirect tax is that the equalization levy is a levy on the gross payments and it's not a levy on the income of the taxpayer. So
I would just like to add one point, Zainab, with your permission, is that just look at the highlighted part on your slide, wherein online has been defined by the committee and in a way has been borrowed into the equalization levy legislation under the definition section under 164 of the Act, if I may say so. Can online ever be regarded or mean a service or a right or a benefit? I have tried to understand myself as to how does these words fit into the definition, but nevertheless, so be it. We may be in for some more future complications around interpretation, but to my view, online simply can mean only a facility. either it could be a physical or it can be an online. At the most, what it is nothing but a facility. Be that as it may, let's just move on, because the history is in a way already known to many of us. Zainab, maybe we will rather touch upon the more issues which are deeper for deliberation today as you
Yes.
want. Yeah.
So just to add a point, considering that this is a kind of an indirect tax and not a tax on income, treaty benefit is not available for equalization levy. And that is one of the drawbacks, that non-residents are not able to claim a foreign tax credit for the same.
And this is just diametrically opposite to the OECD's recommendations, Zainab.
Yes.
Yeah, can we
So
just
yeah, so India has been the first country to introduce equalization levy, and there were many others to follow the footsteps of India, such as many European countries and certain Asian and African countries as well, wherein digital tax was introduced unilaterally in their domestic tax laws. And this digital tax is famously known as digital service tax, that is DST in many of the countries. US was one of the country who had strongly objected to this unilateral implementation of digital tax. It had even launched an investigation in this regard, wherein an investigation on 10 countries, including India, was launched. And what the USTR had concluded is that equalization levy in India is a very unfair and discriminatory kind of levy on, especially for US companies. India has, of course, responded to this allegation, stating that it's not at all discriminatory. Equalization levy is applicable to all the countries and not specifically to US. So it's certainly not a discriminatory levy.
So India basically wanted to move on very fast and just unilaterally, obviously, and it's nothing wrong in a way, I would say, thinking without any bias. But really speaking, what it could have also done is provided some, clarity around the way it has been drafted, and possibly there could have been a treaty respect as far as this law goes. But very clearly the intent was not such, and therefore it is in the way it is currently.
Yeah. So moving on to the provisions of equalization levy, the 2016 provisions, when it was introduced for the first time, was very limited for online digital advertisement. This slide is self-explanatory. I'll not go into detail about the provisions. Just one mention over here. This 2016 levy was more a kind of a withholding tax. It followed a withholding tax regime wherein non-residents were not required to pay the or deposit EQL, but it was the service recipient who were required to withhold and deposit the levy. So non-residents were not bothered with the various compliances to be made in India. That was, of course, possible because this was a levy only on B2B transactions. It was not on B2C transactions. So that is why a withholding tax kind of regime was followed. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, since it's a kind of an indirect tax, what generally happens is this levy is onward passed to the customer, and generally the customer bears this taxes instead of the non-resident. So that's regarding the EQL for 2016.
So now to that extent, it was always a sunk cost for the
Yes.
recipient of service. In a way, it just had to be the way it is. There was no respite. Now let's move on to see really on track, or rather flashback on what happened in 2020.
Yeah, so as we all know, Finance Bill 2020, when it was announced on 1st February, did not have the equalization levy e-commerce operator related provisions. This was an afterthought, and when the bill was placed for the assent, these provisions were included, and the non-resident hardly got any time to prepare for the same, evaluate their transactions, because this levy was applicable from 1st April 2020. there were a lot of operational and procedural issues which were there, considering that to deposit this levy, a PAN was mandatory. So, and this was the time when COVID was at its peak, May, June, not just in India, but countries like US as well. So it was very difficult to collate the documents and do the compliances on time. So if we see the provisions which were introduced, so basically this levy was on non-resident e-commerce operators what this levy was on the e-commerce supply or services made by such non-resident e-commerce operators, and this levy, the supply had to be made either to a person who is resident in India, a non-resident in specified circumstances, and also to a person who uses India IP to buy such goods or services. Now, non-resident in specified services in circumstances included those non-residents who used to sell advertisement targeting India audience or sell the data obtained from any India customer. So these were the two situations which were included in the second bullet.
Which actually has lot of ramifications, as we may appreciate going forward. But just one more aspect I would like to highlight before Zainab we move on to the next slide is that if you really read, if one reads the equalization levy provisions running through the sections, the charging sections, if I'm not wrong, in this case is 165A of the law, and what it basically says is it is a charge on e-commerce supply of services. Now, and subsequently all along the law we read as e-commerce supply or services. The distinction between of and or is just tremendous. Is it e-commerce supply of services only, or is it e-commerce supply of goods as well as services? One may still conclude, I would say, rather than getting into too much of this, saying that it is equalization levy is a charge on e-commerce services or e-commerce supply of goods, rather than getting into the semantics. But I think that would be a better view. Maybe the headline of that section may not be correct.
Yes. One of the exclusions for equalization levy was if the e-commerce operator had a permanent establishment in India and such consideration was effectively connected to such P, then it was excluded from equalization levy net. Here, just to highlight, permanent establishment has been defined to include fixed place P. So service P, agency P are not included. Even business connection, if we see, is not included. So it's only a fixed place P. Although this P definition is inclusive, but it defines only a fixed place P. This next slide is only in relation to compliances. I'll quickly run through. The compliance dates are 7th of the month after the end of the quarter, and there is a annual statement in form number 1 which is required to be filed after the end of the financial year on or before 30th June. And the belated return or revised return can be filed up to 2 years from the end of the financial year. There are certain amendments also made in the Income Tax Act on account of equalization levy. One was exemption under section 1050. This has now been, the date has now been, based on the proposed amendments by Finance Bill 2021, it has been clarified that this section will be applicable from 1st of April 2020. This next slide is also in relation to the compliances. So as far as the equalization levy is concerned, once the statement is filed, the same will be processed. And this process is similar to what we have for under the Income Tax Act under 143(1). A refund can accordingly be issued based on once this statement is processed. Then rectification procedures are also similar to what we have under the Income Tax Act. there are certain penalty provisions as well for non-payment or deduction and non-deduction of equalization levy. And against this penalty order, an assessee or taxpayer can file an appeal before the CIT appeal and the ITAT. Now, just one point to highlight, there are all these procedures, but there is no procedure wherein similar to the 143(2) provisions, an assessment can be conducted. So there are no similar provisions. The only point is, how will the assessing officer say that a particular transaction is subject to equalization levy and raise and accordingly pass an order and raise a demand? When we went through the provisions, what I feel is that once this penalty is determined, a penalty can only be determined if the assessing officer first determines whether equalization levy was payable or not. So maybe the assessing officer, along with the penalty order, may even pass this order wherein they may state that a particular transaction is subject to equalization levy.
So your statement, once it is processed as per section 168 ZENUP, which is very much equivalent to our 143(1), what it tacitly indicates is it truncates the elaborate procedure under 143(2) of the Income Tax Act. The similar provisions are not borrowed in, only because possibly the legislature intended to do away with this rigorous work of to and fro, and summary just conclude tacitly whether it is payable, if yes, how much, if not paid, levy, penalty, finish it off. I mean, this is what, if you see very briefly, comes out of 168, the section 168 of the Finance Act. So in my mind, again, there could be a lot of controversies around. There has to be some opportunity to prove that whether an assessee is really liable for equalization levy at the first place or not. So that is something maybe we will have to wait and watch. But the part here which we are all flagging off is it's directly at the penalty order level. Can we actually take it to the appellate authorities? And that's again the CIT appeals and the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. Really speaking, again, there's no defined procedure similar to the Income Tax Act to go before the High Court or the Supreme Court. But be that as it may, possibly, I mean, again, there's a way to look at it. Maybe the government also feels, and if one reads through the last provision under equalization levy, which is section 180 of the Act, it says that any kind of clarification needs to be made by the CBDT or the government, basically, in relation to any difficulties which may arise in the implementation. However, no such order shall be made after 31st of March 2022. What does that mean really? Are we really looking at a kind of a tacit sunset of equalization levy? If that happens, that's a very good news. But really, again, it contradicts to what we hear, that till the time the global consensus is reached on digital economy taxation, equalization levy is here to stay. So maybe we'll have to see as we progress. But there are going to be a lot of litigations around it, I'm so sure.
Yes. So moving on to the next slide. So these are certain terms which had been defined by the Finance Act 2020. One of it is e-commerce operator. Now, who is an e-commerce operator? Basically, it's a non-resident who owns, operates, or manages any digital or electronic facility. Now, the term own, operate, or manage, how does this play? So own is pretty clear, it's the ownership which is there, but operate or manages, that's where some interpretation may be required. So if, say, I have a particular platform which I am owning it, but I'm not using it for any purpose, and I give it to another person and he pays me some license fee or some fee for using that particular platform, and that person then uses that platform to do his own business and manages or make some changes to the updates the system or digital platform, whatever be the case, then in that case, though I am the owner, but the operation and managing part is being carried out by that person. It is operating and managing should be distinguished from just using it. If someone is just using my platform to say list their products, but ultimately it's being operated and managed by me, then that particular person may not be regarded as a e-commerce operator.
So in
Then
a way, if we are listing our products, say maybe whatever product it is, on a Facebook platform or a WhatsApp group, really speaking, what comes out is possibly we may be out of the ambit. Very technically speaking, if someone were to go after somebody, it could be Facebook or the WhatsApp group. WhatsApp to be very specific, but certainly not the user of that.
yeah,
To that extent, maybe that's a little bit of a exit route for me, or if I may want to plan something that way. But as a small business.
So that example, Sandeep, what it happens is if WhatsApp groups are being used, ultimately I am selling on the WhatsApp group, though I am not owing a digital platform or electronic facility. I am selling and receiving consideration from the buyers. But WhatsApp does not have any role to play in that. So WhatsApp doesn't receive any consideration. WhatsApp doesn't pay me for any goods sold as such. So I think in that case, neither of the parties will be able to be taxed in this equalization levy. So it's
that
only,
was a tacit answer I wanted, or rather
yes.
It was an indication of possibly a exit route, not really that we are suggesting any idea here or anything, rather than flouting or rather anything on this platform. Maybe tomorrow we'll have an amendment specifically to even get this within the tax net in some very arbitrary way. So
yes. And of course, that platform has to be used for some online sale of goods or provision of services. This term has now been defined by the proposed amendments White Finance Bill 2021. Now, the term e-commerce supply of services has also been defined by Finance Act 2020 to state online sale of goods owned by the e-commerce operator, services, or facilitation by the e-commerce operator, or any combination of the above. This definition will, this particular provision will also get widened by the proposed amendments by Finance Act 21. Now, the only question here is how will the tax officer go behind a non-resident and collect the taxes, equalization levy, if the non-resident does not pay such tax? Now, if say the non-resident doesn't have any other entity, group entity, or any other agents over here, whom will the tax officer approach and catch hold of for the levy? Can the the tax officer approach the customers of the non-resident? Based on the representative assessee provisions, yes, but how do they play? The only point is that under the equalization levy, there is one section 178, which states that certain sections from Income Tax Act will be imported in the equalization levy. One of them is Chapter 15 from the Income Tax Act, and Chapter 15 talks about the representative assessee provisions. So in that way, the tax officer can, if they are not able to reach the non-resident e-commerce operator, may get hold of the customers and recover the equalization levy from them. Of course, it will be limited to only the transactions which were there with the customers, that customer to whom the tax officer will catch hold of.
So the implications are pretty wide and the net is cast very big, very wide. Yeah, move on, Sana.
So this slide just lists certain industries and businesses which are impacted because of equalization levy. This is, there will be many more companies and industries which may get impacted. We have just put certain major ones. So if you look at this list, So if we look at this list, the major ones are the online marketplaces. Then there are online tours and travel bookings. Now this is also, say there's a foreign tour operator who is providing certain services online, they may also get impacted under these provisions. Of course, OTT platforms, payment gateways, app stores, all these are getting covered. Online education is now a in thing, especially after COVID, when people are not able to travel. There are many foreign universities who are providing online courses, so those will also get covered within this equalization levy net. Now, these are the proposed amendments by the Finance Bill 2021. We have bucketed it in 4 groups. The first one is the definition of online sale of goods and online provision of services. Now, it's an inclusive definition. If we look at it, anyways, the definition is very wide. To cover any and every leg of transaction. If any one leg is also online, then there is a chance that the said transaction will get covered within this online sale of goods or online provision of services definition. The scope has also been widened for equalization levy. So previously, there was a interpretation issue as to what happens in case of intermediary companies, where, like say Amazon platform, the vendors may be a third party, so goods don't belong to say Amazon or Flipkart, but they facilitate the entire transaction. So whether the entire consideration should be taxable in that case in the hands of Amazon for equalization levy, or only the facilitation charges should be. Now, what this particular amendment states is that whether the goods belong to the e-commerce operator or not, whether the e-commerce operator provides the service or facilitates the service or not, but if it receives a consideration, then that entire consideration will be subjected to equalization levy.
Really speaking, if we all can sense, there's a clear anomaly here, and if I as a taxpayer have to use this provision in a way, or implement this provision harmoniously the way I am supposed to be, then can I read that the consideration here would mean the consideration only which is due to me and not the entire consideration as it is known? So while the word is the reading of the provision clearly indicates that there has to be a gross consideration on which the equalization levy is cast, but what it could definitely not mean is something which I am not supposed to be paying a levy or a tax on. I have to cover that tax. What if the backing up non-resident or the e-commerce operator actually owns the goods, or the vendor actually who owns the goods doesn't reimburse me of the equalization levy which I have actually paid tax on? Commercially speaking, I am very clear there will be agreements between merchants and the intermediaries to that effect, so that this cascading effect, which is very much unwanted and unwarranted, is in a way prevented. So to that extent, we should be getting a clarity from the government.
Yeah, the next 2 amendments, one is the exclusion of royalty and FTS from the ambit of equalization levy, and the timing anomaly of section 1050, that is where it's applicable from 1st April 2020 now. These are the other 2 amendments. In relation to royalty, we will take it later on in the issues section as well. This slide just gives the comparison of what the current position is and what the impact of these amendments will be there. I think we'll just run through this because these issues have been covered later on in the slide. Okay, so these are certain issues. One is in relation to this gross consideration, as Sandeep and I discussed right now, about whether the equalization levy should be on the entire consideration or the portion which is only my consideration as an intermediary. This remains, and the way these amendments have now been proposed, it seems that the government wants to levy it on the entire consideration, not on the consideration only for, belonging to a particular individual.
Just to add that it is not even bothered about the cascading effect.
Yes. Yeah.
Come up with a clarification, maybe not, but it's only something which time will tell. But absent that, Zainab, I have a slight suggestion or maybe a thought for the participants. Till the time the clarifications come, there has to be a position which needs to be adopted. And what should be that position? Should it be gross consideration as it pertains to me, or gross consideration arising from the transaction? The way it reads it, it is gross consideration arising from the transaction very clearly. But I think I would just leave a thought in the minds of the participants that a position must be adopted sooner than later by them.
Yes. The next issue, as mentioned, is in relation to the exemption provided for royalty and FTS. Now, the point over here is that, say, if the royalty or FTS is taxable under the Act but exempt under the DTAA provisions, will it be liable to EQL? Now, how this amendment reads is that if the royalty FTS is taxable under the Act, read with the provisions of the relevant double taxation avoidance agreement. So, if we read both the provisions together, royalty FTS is not taxable, and that is why if there is an exemption under a DTAA, then it is possible that equalization levy will apply in those cases. Now, here just to highlight the point is whether it should be regarded as taxable, because this in short overrides the treaty provisions, which, as mentioned in Action Plan 1, the OECD has specifically mentioned that the countries, while implementing unilaterally these laws, should take care that the treaty provisions don't get override. But it seems the way the amendment has been worded, that if it is exempt under DTAA and taxable under the Income Tax Act, if we read both the provisions together, the said payment may not be taxable as royalty or FTS, and so it will be subject to EQL. Other issue is in relation to, say, this timing anomaly which was there under section 1050. So many companies may have taken a position that for financial year 2021, both the equalization levy as well as the Income Tax Act provisions will apply. So in this case, if the payments of equalization levy has already been paid, now the only issue will be how to recover that, claim the refund for the said provisions. I think the refund can only be claimed if the non-residents will file the Form 1 and show the consideration subject to equalization levy as 0 and then claim the refund. Now, how quickly this process is going to be taking place, that we need to see. Another point in this royalty FTS issue is what happens, because see, the software payments, if we see the taxability under the double taxation avoidance agreement is still an issue, which is before the High Court and Supreme Court in a few cases. So what happens if I take a position that this particular payment is not taxable under the DTAA, and then I will have to be paying equalization levy on the same. Subsequently, after a few years, I get a favorable ruling which states that this is I may get a unfavorable ruling stating that this is royalty payments. In that case, there will be a tax liability which will be raised under the Income Tax Act. So will this equalization levy which I have already paid be settled against the income tax liability? So how will it work? Because maybe after 10, 15 years, if I get a High Court or Supreme Court ruling, by that time the revision timelines will already have lapsed for equalization levy. So how to claim a refund for that? Moving on to the next issue, online sale of goods and online provision of services. Now, this being a very wide definition, what it means is that even if, say, I am availing some services outside India and using that services outside India, still that may be taxable in India because I am an Indian resident. So
this we can take through that case study.
Yeah.
Maybe in the interest of time, let's just move on
Yeah,
and we'll
okay.
cover it in the case study. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So these are few other issues which we have listed down in relation to equalization levy. One of them, the second box, which shows that if, say, there is a permanent, I believe that there is no permanent establishment, but later on the tax authorities hold the same. What will happen to the equalization levy which I have paid, similar to royalty FTS? What happens if an Indian resident goes outside India, uses IP address of outside India and purchases some online goods? Then shouldn't that be exempt from equalization levy, considering that non-residents using IP India are taxed? So if residents use IP India outside India, those transactions should be exempt from equalization levy. One other important issue is the allocation of consideration. In case of online advertisements, this is one of the considerations. Say if the target audience is across jurisdictions, what is the basis of allocation of the consideration? Will it be based on per clicks, on usage of bytes, or how it will be? In this slide,
tax is not there.
Yeah.
We don't have a bit tax in other countries as of now, but there is a discussion at the European Union on that if at all it comes, but it's 0.0001% of the bit or the bytes used in the internet traffic. Quite a complex thing, but let's see. I don't think India is going to see that kind of a regime, and that's good.
Okay. On this slide, just briefly going through the interplay between SEP and equalization levy. Once SEP becomes effective, there will be a lot of overlapping between SEP and equalization levy. However, what we believe is under section 1050 as an exemption, equalization levy may be overruling the SEP provisions.
SEP provisions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I can't imagine really, Zainab, 3 laws, I mean 3 things in a way, almost, or 4 things all operative in India. So much confusion and so much of, clarity pending at the government level. And what will be the fate of Indian litigations, I mean, as far as tax goes, really speaking, really unfathomable as of now.
Yes, and anyways, the SEP provisions, I think, are not relevant from the treaty countries with which India has a treaty. So this will only be for non-treaty countries effective. So till the time the treaties are amended to that effect.
Right.
This slide 194 versus equalization levy, just to give a comparative analysis, the one major difference in this particular thing is equalization levy is on the e-commerce operators, a charge on the e-commerce operators, whereas equalization, the 194O provisions are applicable on the income of the e-commerce participants. Interplay between equalization levy and GST. Now, OIDAR supplies which are there in the GST, there are a lot of, I think, principles which equalization levy may have picked up from there. The main moot point over here is, I think, the GST definition of e-commerce operator and its applicability are much narrower compared to what equalization levy right now stands. So we may just have to ensure and see how it works, because in one case, say, equalization levy regulations, a particular person may be considered as an e-commerce operator, but under GST regulations, that may not be the case. So the interplay needs to be worked out.
Even within the income tax law itself, if you compare, or rather the income tax provisions along with the Finance Act, Zainab, there are some additional definitions under section 194O and the equalization levy in itself. So even between GST and equalization levy, one of the key things is the difference in the definition itself of various things which needs to be aligned for a position to be adopted by any taxpayer in that regard. Because OIDAR will catch them doesn't mean that I automatically got caught under equalization levy or I have a fair risk of equalization levy. Everywhere there's a need of a deeper analysis before we commit to something. That's the message going out now.
Yeah. So few case studies. Now in this first scenario, there is an MCO, which is an online marketplace outside India. There is an FCO, who is a third-party vendor outside India, and there is an Indian customer. So FCO lists certain goods for selling on MCO's platform. The Indian customer accesses MCO's platform and purchases that goods. Now and pays a consideration to MCO. MCO holds back out of 100 consideration, holds back 10 as a facilitation fees and pays FCO 90. Now in this case, who will be liable to pay equalization levy? Is it MCO or is it FCO? Just to go back to the e-commerce operator definition, what it states is that the e-commerce operator owns, manages, or operates the digital facility. Now, in this case, the digital platform is owned by MCO. What FCO does is only uses that platform for listing its products, for selling it. It is not operating or managing the platform. So the equalization levy will fall on MCO, and MCO will have to pay on entire 100, as we discussed, because it's on the gross consideration and not on only the facilitation fees. This case law is just a slight difference is FCO owns the online platform and also sells its own goods on the said platform. PICO is a payment gateway who is appointed by FCO for facilitating the payments from the customers. So in this case, what happens, Indian customer goes on to FCO's platform, purchases the goods. While making the payment, it gets directed to the platform of PICO. Now in this case, PICO receives the consideration from the Indian customer and pays, after retaining say 2 rupees as its facilitation fees, it pays 98 back to FCO. Now, who is the e-commerce operator in this case, and what is the amount on which EQL is leviable? FCO owns, operates, and manages this platform. So FCO squarely gets covered under as e-commerce operator. But now here, what happens is payment gateway also has a platform, though it's only a payment platform, but it does owe a digital platform, and it is the one who is receiving the consideration from the Indian customer for sale of goods, though those goods don't belong to PICO. But as per the recent proposed amendment, even if you receive consideration for goods which you don't owe, still that if you qualify as an e-commerce operator, you will be leviable, the equalization levy will apply to you. So as based on this, it seems that PICO may also, PICO will be the one who may be responsible for paying the equalization levy in this case. What is the amount is, again, as discussed, it should be on the gross amount, that is the entire 100, though it seems to be unfair in the sense that on 100, 2 will be the equalization levy, and 2 is what PICO is retaining as its own consideration. So these situations will require a lot of contractual changes which will have to be made, wherein PICO may have to amend the agreement with FCO, stating that I will not only withhold my share of facilitation charges, but also recover from you the equalization levy, because ultimately the EQL liabilities of FCO, but just because of the provisions, PICO may be responsible for paying the same. This case study
we will cover it later again subsequently. Maybe there could be some questions around it.
Yeah.
But this point will certainly require a lot of deliberation, even at the industry forums, to have a kind of a clarity from the government.
Yes. This case study, I think we discussed in some bit. If there's a royalty payment by, say, EFCO to an Indian, the transfer of IP rights by EFCO to Indian customer, and the Indian customer makes the payment. So we have covered two scenarios here. One, in the first scenario, what happens in the second source rule, say the resident is using that IP not for its business in India, but for business outside India. So there's an exemption under section 916, and based on that, the payments will not be taxable as royalty. Now the question is, say, because of this exemption source rule, it gets exemption under the Income Tax Act, but then it gets covered under the equalization levy, because equalization levy states if it's taxable as royalty, then EQL may not apply. But in this case, it's not taxable as royalty. So I mean, in spite of the source rule not being fulfilled, this, I think EFCO may have to pay equalization levy, because equalization levy is on consideration and not on income. So source rule doesn't apply in case of equalization levy. The second scenario, I think we covered, wherein the treaty definition is narrower, and based on that, there is an exemption. The last.
Move on.
Yeah, the last case study refers to a situation, say, I mean, EFCO is a company who is providing certain services outside India, and say I, as a person, is going to travel to Europe for a tour, and I book a Eurorail ticket using its website to travel within Europe. And in this case, will Eurorail be eligible? I mean, it will be, it should be paying equalization levy in India or not? Now, it seems to be a bit weird, considering that Eurorail has nothing to do with India, except that I, being in India, booked the ticket from India. The services are being provided outside India. Everything is outside India. But just because I am a resident Indian and booking using its platform, booking the tickets, Eurorail may be subject to equalization levy. So again, the source rule doesn't fulfill here, but still equalization levy will apply.
Something which Eurorail or anybody will not accept, and therefore what is very important, Zainab, is to adopt a very pragmatic position, and which is quite defendable before the Supreme Court also. So because the intent is running completely, while it is unilateral, but at the same time it has no bounds, which is something even the OECD, it goes against the OECD's diktat also. To that extent, maybe any court or a higher court will at least strike it down. That's my personal hope, or I mean, let's hope that's how it works. But be that as it may, I think you were on the last slide. Sorry, we have overshot a little, but I think the last one is very important, as we all would understand is what we all get out of this entire thing is there's a very, very dire need of a immediate deep dive into how exactly we need to adopt a position and which way it should be. So we have listed down a few possible courses of action on the slide very clearly, but that may not be all. There could be something more which we could think and improvise on in the days to come. I think that's from all of us today on this. Happy to have any questions, if any. Alisha and Dipankar, if you have any questions, we can take up a few if you permit, or if you have any specific arrangements for us to issue a FAQ based on the questions received, I leave it to your consideration.
So, Sandeep and Zainab, thank you very, very much. It was a really informative session, and we learned a lot. And I hope the audience also enjoyed the conversation. It was very, very informative. So thank you. As far as questions are concerned, we could take some of the questions, but I would suggest, because there are so many of them, what we normally do is that, if the questions are put on the chat, we would issue another FAQ or a kind of a question answer kind of a guide on these questions that you raise, and they can be shared with anybody who has raised those questions. So I think that way we can do more justice to all the questions that are being raised. So I am very happy to say that we will, of course, share the presentation with everybody, and with everybody who has asked a question, we would share this document, which could serve a more long-running guide for you on this complex topic of law. And what I would also say that the Reverse platform is a platform for ongoing conversation. We are very happy to organize smaller group talk if we find that there are a small group of